as you choose.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Ranking Member, members. Thank you for allowing me to spend a little bit of time with you this morning. You do have my written testimony. I'm going to try to summarize it. My purpose in coming before you today is to highlight the critical importance of our efforts in all spheres across the Indo-Pacific region. Since the end of the Second World War, the U.S. has helped to build a free and open order in the Indo-Pacific region that has guaranteed security, enhanced trade and development, and promoted human rights. And this rules-based order has created conditions that prevented large-scale war and encouraged economic growth and democratic development, allowing the region to become one of the fastest-growing in the world. Among the success stories, ironically, of this regional order is China, a country that in just a generation has lifted countless millions, hundreds of millions, out of poverty and grown into one of the world's largest economies. But we now have a choice to make with China, where China will be deciding, and we will be deciding whether China will continue to be part of this rules-based order, whether it will continue with a path of growth and interaction and peace, or whether it will reject the rules-based liberal democratic order and export authoritarianism, reject human rights, and advance its own interests to the exclusion of others. So as I sit here with you in terms of how we should expend our valuable funds in the area of the Department of State and related foreign affairs, I will say that I believe that it is critical for us to get it right with respect to the Indo-Pacific region and China specifically. And I think that the answer is the fullest possible engagement. So I do not agree with those that believe that the solution to the Indo-Pacific region and China and the rest of the world is to disengage. I believe that the answer is the fullest possible engagement, not only with China, but with our allies and partners, folks out there that have stood by us for generations since the Second World War, and folks that we want to stand with us today as we go down the road. This has been a nonpartisan, bipartisan effort over at least the past 2 presidencies and multiple Congresses who have committed us to the same basic strategy in the Indo-Pacific to strengthen our alliances and partnerships, increase our military presence, and you certainly will in this committee, the broader committee, evaluate the military defense budget in that context, but also to promote trade, development, and the rule of law, the projection of soft power, as some people talk about it. Congress affirmed this strategy last year through the Asia Reassurance Initiative Act, and I urge this committee, number one, to appropriate the necessary funding to carry out that act and support related programs that contribute to our strategy in the Indo-Pacific. I say this all because I believe it's in the interest of our country, but also because, as a representative from Hawaii, I know that we have an incredibly important role to play in the Indo-Pacific. Not only do we have in Hawaii the headquarters of Indo-PACOM, the largest and I believe most important, if I can say it that way, unified command that we have in our world today, stretching all the way from the west coast of California to the west coast of India, the entire Pacific and half the Indian Oceans. But we also truly lie at the intersection of East and West in Hawaii, and have for generations now. We have for generations now hosted foreign visitors, business people, students, and professionals. And there's a great mixing in Hawaii that often goes unrecognized in the rest of the country on all levels, whether it be defense, whether it be economic, whether it be social, whether it be educational, whether it be professional, scientific, whether it just be visitors in a restaurant in Waikiki talking to each other about their respective countries. We have a role to play in this, and we have programs in Hawaii that have been funded to that effect in Hawaii. The one that I want to focus on today is the East-West Center. The East-West Center was started in 1960, and it was started for this specific purpose, to facilitate and foster engagement on several levels between East and West. We saw after the war that we needed to start to reach out to the Asia-Pacific region in a systematic way. The East-West Center, which is affiliated with the University of Hawaii, not part of the University of Hawaii, and those of you that have been there know that it's a beautiful facility that works very, very hard to have the top scholars in the world host an atmosphere in which folks can come together to provide mutual education, foster better relationships and understanding. Programs include education, research, and professional development for students, scholars, and officials from across the Indo-Pacific region. In 2018 alone, the center had over 3,400 participants from 41 countries in its programs, hosted 24 public events here in its Washington, D.C. offices, And I think that most importantly, if you look through the generations, the East-West Center now has 65,000 alumni. They're spread out all throughout the Indo-Pacific region. So you have leaders of India and Pakistan and China and Japan and the compact countries of the South Pacific and Australia, who have all come together at one time or another at the East-West Center, and they have their own network. I think that's incredibly valuable, incredibly critical to us as we go through this next generation where we are going to have stresses and strains in the Indo-Pacific region that we have simply not seen before. So I'm here to advocate for full funding for the East-West Center. The East-West Center in the last number of years has sometimes wondered whether it was going to survive from one year to the other. It has not been in some president's budgets. It has been on the chopping block here on occasion. And, you know, I just frankly think that after 2 generations of success, 2 generations in which it has developed and demonstrated its worth, that it deserves at this point, especially considering the importance of the Indo-Pacific region, the contributions that the East-West Center has played and can play, that we recognize it for what it is and provide a more stable level of funding over the next generation. So I would support full funding of its request at $20.1 million for the upcoming fiscal year. Beyond that, I certainly would support other key efforts that are critical to the Indo-Pacific region. For example, the FMF and IMET programs operated by state in conjunction with DoD have been really, really valuable, I think, to the Indo-Pacific region, and would certainly urge that those be funded. Similarly with the Economic Support Fund and the Development Assistance accounts. Sometimes it is difficult to calculate the impact of more indirect spending out in the rest of the world, including the Indo-Pacific, but I believe that at this point we can conclude that this is incredibly valuable spending for us, and I would certainly advocate that this subcommittee focus on the Indo-Pacific region as you consider your important work. Thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions.
Stronger. I'm not sure that the East-West Center is doing enough to spread that idea, and more importantly, to counteract it. What do you think?
Well, I think it's an excellent question, and I think it does get to the mission of the East-West Center, because my own belief is that with China, and you could say the same thing of Russia or any other adversaries or potential adversaries around the world, the best possible approach in the big picture is first and foremost a strong defense, so that you don't encourage anybody to think you will be taken advantage of, but also engagement on all levels. So as you can engage from the international trade perspective, you strengthen those ties. As you can engage from the educational and social and financial and business aspect, you strengthen those ties. That's the best. I think that's the best way to deal with China. I have absolutely no hesitation to say that I think Indo-PACOM should be fully funded. I think that it needs what it needs to get the job done in the Indo-Pacific region. But that's not the only way to handle China. And I think if we go down simply a pure defense approach, then we will be making a mistake with China in the long run. I think that where the East-West Center fits into it, if I understand your comments correctly, you are perhaps concerned that the East-West Center is not firm enough with China. And I think my response to you on that would be that I think the East-West Center's role is to engage all of our partners, all of our potential partners, and even our adversaries in a process that hopefully will kind of be the carrot side of it as opposed to the stick side of it. And so I don't think the East-West Center really has the responsibility of sitting there and telling China to go take a hike. I think the East-West Center has the responsibility of, and other agencies as well. And I'll give you one more example very quickly. We in Honolulu, in Hawaii, because of our geographic role and our cultural role, we belong to the Asia-Pacific region. If I fly from here to Honolulu, I am more than halfway to Asia. So that'll give you some sense of where we think we are in terms of the world. So we think a lot about the Indo-Pacific, and so does the Indo-Pacific. They think that Honolulu and Hawaii is kind of a safe place to have these discussions. So we have not only Indo-PACOM, which engages China, right there at Indo-PACOM. We have the East-West Center, which engages China. We also have the Asia-Pacific Center for Security Studies, which is a DoD affiliate, which engages China. And I think they all have that role. So I think the East-West Center has a really critical role to play in terms of trying to always, with a strong military defense posture, encourage China to remain engaged, to play by the rules, to play by the international trade rules. And that's what their role is. And even the professional rules. You have leaders of China right now that attended the East-West Center. I think that's a good thing, that they have some familiarity, that they've met with people from Bali that have also been to the East-West Center.
Constructive,
Sure.
I have to say. When I left Nebraska, it was -4. If you really want to have an impact, I think a field hearing at the East-West Center in Hawaii would have been preferable to this presentation.
I think that's I want to speak, I think that's an excellent idea. I think that there is a great need for people from Nebraska to understand the Indo-Pacific region.
Okay, we found common cause and common ground. Just on a serious note, following up on what Ranking Member Rogers, our former chairman, said, I think this issue of China looms so large in terms of really the 21st century architecture of diplomatic relations. And both the USAID director, as I recall, but recently I was with, frankly, the Secretary of State yesterday and 2 days ago in Iowa, spoke of China's predatory lending practice. And the more that we can socialize this concept, I think the world actually is awakened to this harsh reality of coming in and holding hostage, in effect, developing countries to their larger ideological agenda. I get what you're saying, and I respect what you're saying in terms of the East-West Center being a bridge for diplomatic dialogue and not necessarily the hammer side of the carrot, but of the incentives. But I do think socializing this harsh reality of what China has done in really improperly disrupting what ought to be fundamental attacks by all of us on structural poverty around the world to lead to stability and good diplomatic outcomes. I throw that to you to connect with them.
No, I think it's along the same lines as your question, Ranking Member. It's a very good debate. How do we deal with China in the big picture over the next generations, long after we're not here anymore? I think that if you listen to the debate, let's define the debate by its extremes. One side of the debate says, let's only deal with this militarily and let's isolate China. And let's basically dry up any contact with China in all other spheres. Okay, so that's kind of one extreme. The other extreme is we don't really have to worry about China, and if we, appease China and placate them and let them do what they want to do, then that's the way to go.
Or the free market, in its working itself out, will ultimately create the types of interconnectedness that we will develop human rights and respect for.
Well, and that's
I think that's in the extreme too.
Yes, and one could argue that's part of the policy we've followed for the last 20 years, that we hoped that would happen. Now, obviously, it didn't. So let's be frank about that. I think we're on the same page, aren't we? So then the question is, what do we do? And I'm saying that we need to pursue this on a number of levels. It's a very nuanced set of levels. I am saying, I'm agreeing with you, first of all, on your premise. Okay, so I'm not one of those people that is naive about China. I think China has every aspiration to be the dominant world power and to not participate in a world order if it can get away with that, if it serves its own purposes, and it's busy trying to do that. We need a strong military in the Pacific, so let's do that given. Now let's talk about the rest of it. How do we actually try to get China to modify its behavior? And I think engagement is the right way to do that. Sometimes you can't see it happening until it actually happens. For example, I've been in meetings at the East-West Center, or for that matter, other places in Hawaii, and I've heard from members that have participated in meetings of the same thing, where you have people from China who come into those meetings. Now they're safe zones for talking. They're not in China. They're told in no uncertain terms how the rest of the world is feeling about them. I think that's valuable that they take that back to China. And you never know when it's going to actually result in a change in behavior. But what I think can happen, if we're not careful, if we isolate China and really shut it off from that avenue of discourse, whether that avenue of discourse is at the East-West Center or the Asia-Pacific Center for Security Studies, or any number of other possible areas to have that, then you're going to end up in a situation like North Korea, where you have nobody that really knows what's happening, and they don't know enough about the rest of the world to bring it back to North Korea to say, hey, this is really what the view is out there. So I think that that's what's so valuable about this particular track. And yeah, those discussions should include, you guys are not playing by the rules. You're predatory lending. You're stealing intellectual property. You are dominating and losing your own partners. That's the struggle that we have. It's a big picture struggle, and we've got to fight that struggle on a multiple levels. So this is, I'm talking way beyond the East-West Center, but it fits into that pattern.